You said yes when you meant no. And you still don't fully understand why. Not because you were weak. Not because you weren't paying attention. You were right there, in the room, fully conscious, watching yourself agree to something you didn't want, and some part of your mind just let it happen. You've probably blamed yourself for that moment. Called it a character flaw. But what if the real explanation has nothing to do with weakness, and everything to do with the way your brain was built to be opened? The question worth sitting with is this: how much of what you believe, buy, agree to, and commit to was actually your decision? Most people assume manipulation looks like a con artist. Someone slick, obvious, working angles you'd spot from across the room. But that's not where it lives. It lives in the ordinary. Think about the last time a coworker asked you to cover for them and framed it as a small favor, after spending the previous week helping you with a deadline. You said yes. Not because you wanted to. Because saying no felt like breaking something. Or think about the last time a salesperson told you that a deal was ending soon, that only 3 units were left, and your pulse quickened just slightly, and you made a decision faster than you'd intended. Or think about the last time someone you barely knew complimented you genuinely, specifically right before asking you for something. And the ask felt harder to refuse than it should have. These aren't random moments. They follow a pattern. And that pattern was mapped with extraordinary precision by a researcher named Robert Cialdini. In 1984, after spending 3 years going undercover, training with car salespeople, studying charity fundraisers, embedding himself in advertising agencies, Cialdini published a book called Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion. It was built on one central finding: human beings don't make decisions the way they think they do. They use mental shortcuts. And those shortcuts can be located, targeted, and activated. His 6 principles of influence: reciprocity, commitment and consistency, social proof, authority, liking, and scarcity, weren't theories. They were mechanics. Levers with known pressure points. And the reason this happens is stranger than you think. Your brain is not a deliberation machine. It's an efficiency machine. Every second, your senses deliver roughly 11 million bits of information to your nervous system. Your conscious mind can process about 40 to 50 of those bits. The rest gets handled automatically by systems that evolved long before language, before markets, before persuasion as an industry. Those automatic systems run on heuristics. Rules of thumb. Mental shortcuts that were, for most of human history, genuinely reliable. If others are doing something, it's probably safe. If someone gives you something, you owe them. If an authority figure says it's true, it probably is. These weren't weaknesses. They were survival adaptations. The problem is that they were built for a world that no longer exists, and they still run at full speed in the one that does. Here's what that looks like in the brain. A 2012 study by Burns, Chapello, and colleagues at Emory University scanned the brains of participants while they received advice from experts and made financial decisions. When an expert weighed in, activity in the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for calculating, evaluating, and comparing, actually decreased. The brain effectively offloaded the decision. It didn't analyze the expert's reasoning. It accepted it. In a sample of 24 participants, the pattern was consistent: authority didn't enhance critical thinking. It replaced it. Now add Cialdini's reciprocity principle. In a study conducted at a research university, waiters who left a single mint with the check received tips 14% higher than those who left nothing. Waiters who left 2 mints received tips 23% higher. But the most telling result: waiters who left 1 mint, walked away, then turned back and offered a second, as if making a personal exception, received tips 38% higher than the control group. The tip wasn't tracking the value of the mint. It was tracking the feeling of having been given something special. That feeling bypasses your rational mind entirely. It activates a deeply wired social obligation, one that your ancestors needed to survive in small, interdependent groups where not reciprocating a gift could get you exiled. Your brain still lives in that village. It cannot fully distinguish between a stranger's calculated generosity and a genuine act of care. And so the mechanism fires anyway. Scarcity does something even stranger. It changes what you want. Not just how urgently you want it, what you want. In a classic experiment, participants rated the quality of cookies. One group received a jar with 10 cookies. Another received a jar with 2. The cookies were identical. The group with 2 rated them as significantly better. Scarcity didn't reveal hidden value. It created the perception of value where none had changed. Your brain interpreted rarity as a signal of quality. And that signal overrode your direct sensory experience. This is the mechanism. Not trickery layered on top of your thinking. Trickery built into the architecture of your thinking. Now consider what this costs. There's a version of this story that plays out in a department store. You've been helped for 45 minutes by a salesperson who was warm and funny and somehow knew exactly what you were looking for. And now you're standing at the register with something you didn't come in to buy, spending money you hadn't planned to spend, and the justification you're building in your mind, it was a good deal, I needed it eventually, is constructed entirely in the moment to match a decision that was already made. The liking principle and the reciprocity principle fired in sequence. You didn't notice either. There's another version in a relationship. Someone who needed you to believe they were an authority on what was best for you, a partner, a mentor, a parent, and who used that perceived authority over years to move the boundaries of what you accepted. Small asks followed by larger ones. Consistency exploited, you agreed last time, so refusing now means you've changed, become difficult, become ungrateful. The commitment and consistency principle works beautifully in long-term manipulation because the architecture is invisible. You don't feel like you're being pressured. You feel like you're being yourself. And then there's the hardest version. The one where you are the last to know. You've been saying yes for so long that the pattern has become your identity. You think of yourself as generous, accommodating, flexible. People around you have come to rely on that. Some of them have built entire strategies around it, consciously or not. And the moment you try to say no, something feels wrong. Not because the no is wrong. Because your self-concept was built on the yes. The social proof principle extended inward, you've watched yourself comply so many times that you've accepted compliance as a personality trait. It isn't. It's a lever that was pulled repeatedly until you stopped noticing the pull. The cost isn't just money, or time, or wrong decisions. The cost is the slow erosion of your ability to know what you actually want separate from what you've been maneuvered into wanting. Which raises the question, can any of this actually change? Here is what changes when you understand the mechanism. You stop blaming yourself for the moments it worked on you. That's not small. Most people who feel manipulated in retrospect convert that experience into shame, which makes them less likely to examine what happened and more likely to repeat it. Understanding that reciprocity is a neurological trigger, not a moral failure, interrupts that loop. It lets you be curious about the moment instead of ashamed of it. And curiosity is where the actual shift lies. When you recognize the pressure of scarcity, you can ask, would I want this if there were 50 of them? When you feel the pull of someone's warmth right before an ask, you can notice the timing without rejecting the warmth. When an authority tells you something and your prefrontal cortex starts to go quiet, you can name what's happening and re-engage the evaluation you were about to skip. This isn't about becoming suspicious of everyone. It's about developing a finer-grained awareness of your own internal states. The researcher Ellen Langer spent decades studying what she called mindlessness, the condition of operating on automatic, following scripts without examining them. Her work showed that the simple act of noticing a trigger was enough to partially interrupt it. Not neutralize. Not eliminate. Partially interrupt. Which is not nothing. That's the margin between a decision and a reaction. Cialdini himself was clear on this. The principles are not inherently predatory. They are the normal machinery of social influence, used every day for benign and legitimate purposes. Knowing this makes you more human, not less. It means that when you feel the pull of social proof or the weight of a reciprocal debt, you're not being foolish. You're being biological. You're running ancient code in a modern environment. What changes is the gap between stimulus and response. That gap is the territory where you actually live, where genuine choice becomes possible. The architecture of influence is everywhere. It's in the menu design at the restaurant you ate at last week, the layout of the page you were on this morning, the conversation you had yesterday that left you feeling vaguely obligated. It was there before you knew what it was. Now you know what it is. That makes you harder to move without your consent.